it is good to be here, and I've learned so much from Bridget. Hopefully you've been hearing some of the interviews that we've done with Bridget over the past few months on the air. And I like to just get someone like Bridget talking, because I learn something all the time, because I'll tell you, you guys are here because you know all the pitfalls. It's like going through a maze trying to figure out, what do we do next? We get the kids in or what? Because we've got an aging population. And that's, I'm 1 year older today, as a matter of fact, so I'm getting older as well. People always ask me, when are you going to retire? I said, I don't know, I haven't figured it out yet. I enjoy what I do. The same thing you guys enjoy doing what you do. You enjoy farming, you enjoy being on the farm, you got family with you, but there are so many young kids out there that want to farm, and it's really a challenge. And just think how it's changed. I remember when I started on the radio back 38 years ago, we were talking back then about, well, we went from open pollinated seeds to hybrid seeds, we went from horses, we went to tractors, we went from the bull to artificial insemination. Man, weren't those earth-changing activities. And now look at what we're dealing with. It's unbelievable, the hybrids, the seed genetics, the machinery technology that we have. Sit in the tractor and work it, and you don't have to read the paper and let the tractor do what it wants to do. I mean, it's unbelievable, it's mind-boggling. And those things went from open seed, open pollinated seed to hybrid. Those things we're talking 30, 40 years. Now we're talking 6 months of change that is absolutely radical as far as what's going on in agriculture. So it is mind-boggling, and that's why, you know, it's good to get into programs like these so this next generation can get in. Every week I talk to FFA chapters. Every week I talk to kids. What do you want to do? I'd like to farm. But just think the expense of getting into a farm. You know it as well as I do. And it's hard to get these young people in. That's why you guys are credit to making sure that this is going to be passed on from your generation to the next generation here. And in spite of the weather, as it's changing now, it reminds me, one of my favorite Ole and Lena stories has to do with the weather. Ole and Lena sold the farm, and then they moved to town. You know, when you're on the farm, you just park wherever you want to park. You know, you don't worry about parking on one side of the road or the other. Ole and Lena were up for breakfast one morning. They were listening to the radio, and the guy on the radio says, "Oh, we got a big storm coming through today. You got to park your car on the even side of the street." Well, Ole never lived in town before, so he got in the car and parked it on the even side of the street. Everything was fine. Got up the next morning having breakfast. Well, the storm hasn't passed completely through yet, so you got to park on the even side of the, or the odd side of the street today. So Ole gets up and gets in the car and parks it on the other side of the street. Well, everything was fine. Next morning, still a storm. Ole said, "Oh my Lord, I got to park at Lena. I got to park it back on the even side of the street today." Lena looked at Ole and said, "Ole, why don't you just leave it in the garage today?" So it is a challenge to move from the farm to the city. It's a transition. If you've ever been in Europe, they don't leave, because where do they farm? The farms are in the city. So you got multi-generations right there in town. So it's a dynamic that is unbelievable. And again, some of you older folks that are here, when you started farming, did you have a crop consultant? Did you have a nutritionist? You did it all yourself, but now you can't. And the same thing with tax laws and succession plans, wills. You thought, talking to Bridget, I learned something. I thought, well, you got a will, you're good to go. She said, no, you're not. There's so much more. And I'm learning that all the time when I talk to Bridget. It's unbelievable. I was last week down at the FFA convention in Louisville. And I was thinking about coming here and just making a few comments like this. And I'm down there, there's 64, new record attendance, 64,000 plus at the FFA convention, including probably 55,000 of those, 55,000 of those were probably FFA students. And you talk to a lot of them, what do they want to do? Well, a lot of them, you know, they're going to be vets and they're going to go into agribusiness, but a lot of them want to farm. And you talk to them about well, you got a family operation, some of them, yeah, and they're moving into the family operation. Others are starting out with maybe 5 or 10 cows, milking them at a neighbor's farm to try and get some kind of grub stake started up. So there are a lot of ways to do it, but boy, it's a challenge. And you've got to get people of the mindset of how can we do this to help the young people and still protect what we've built up over the years, so we're going to get value out of that. And that's a challenge that we're really faced with. And I'm just going to end with this. I went down last spring in March, I believe, to the, what they call it was down in San Antonio, the Commodity Classic. Anybody ever been at Commodity Classic? That's corn, wheat, soybean growers. They all come together now. They used to have individual meetings, but they all come together now. And, you know, they're talking about what's going on, and these guys are talking, some of these farmers are talking about using drones and all these sorts of things, which is, you know, something else, you know, the black helicopter crowd. And they're talking about this, and I got into one session, and it had to do with just what you guys are here with today. And the speaker was a professor, and I've listened to him many times, from Purdue University. And he got up in front of that crowd, and there was 2,000 or 3,000 people in there, and these are these big farmers and ranchers out west. You know, they got their Wrangler jeans hooked up in their alligator boots and their fancy Western shirts, and they're all sitting there. This guy comes out, and he looked at them, and he says, "You ought to be ashamed of yourselves." They're looking at them, and he's talking about what you're doing to the next generation. And he went on to explain what these guys were doing to their children and grandchildren, paying so much for land, knowing that the corn and bean price never is going to stay where it's at, putting them so far in debt that you'll be long gone and they're going to be stuck with this debt, and then they're going to be failures as farmers, and it's all your fault. And boy, I'm telling you what, that got some attention. There were some guys that came out of there scratching their heads, wondering if they made the right decision to pay $300, $400, $500 in rent. Buy new combines and tractors every year, which is fine if you can make it work. I'm not against that at all. Make as much money as you can, but you've got to have the foresight to look down the road, which all you folks are doing now by trying to get things in order for the next generation. And I'm telling you, I talked to a few guys after that, and they said, boy, it made me stop and think, am I going to keep buying land at $15,000, $18,000 an acre? You know, remember back in the late 70s and 80s we did that. We always said, well, we already own 1,000 acres, we can buy 200 or 300 more, pay 18 or 20% interest and write it off against the rest of the land. Well, all of a sudden all that land was on the market because it didn't work that way. That's the only saving grace we have now are the interest rates. So again, planning for the future. This guy from Purdue told these guys, you're not planning for the future, you're planning for future failure by putting that next generation under such a financial hardship with land prices, with the commodity prices. As they always say, the best cure for high prices is high prices. And we found that out this year with the corn and bean crops we're looking at. So I congratulate you folks for being here and planning for that next generation, or however plans you're putting your plans together, because there are a lot of them around the country that I've seen that haven't, and it's a challenge to get this done. So I congratulate you and the generation. It reminds me of another story about an older couple, and they were so old the old boy still farmed with mules, and he was farming with his mule. It got to be dinner time at noon, and the wife comes out, Henry, dinner time. Well, Henry was nowhere to be found, so she walked out into the barn, and there's Henry, currying his mule. Currying the mule for noon, giving the mule some oats, currying the mule. And she gets up behind that mule, and she's yelling, Henry, I've been calling you for dinner. And man, the mule kicks her, and down she went, she was gone, just like that. Well, they got to the funeral, and there was Ruth laying in her casket, and Henry standing there taking people by. The minister was watching this whole thing all the time. Finally goes up to Henry, he says, Henry, I got to ask you a question or two. Yeah, what's up, minister, pastor? He said, well, I noticed that as all the women walk by here, you're nodding your head yes, in agreement. He said, oh, that's easy. They're saying what a tragedy it was and how beautiful Ruth looks laying there in the casket. He says, well, that's good. But all the men are walking by here, and every time you talk to the men, you're shaking your head no. He said, well, that's simple. They all want to know if that mule's for sale. So anyway, we move on, and I'm glad to see everybody here. And it's not, what I like to see is not everybody here has hair the same color as I do, which means you're planning early. You're doing a good job, and I appreciate that. I thank Bridget and the rest of the folks for inviting me here. And again, like I said, I appreciate all the education I've gotten from Bridget over the last few months, because believe me, I've learned a lot from talking to Bridget and listening to Bridget and what she's had to say, and I hope you have too, and I know you're going to learn a lot today. So let's get at it. I'm going to get out of the way here.